the scorching sun beat down on the dusty, windswept plains of Redemption Valley, a place where fortunes were seldom made and hardships were carved into the very lines on a man's face. Jedediah Thorne, a monolith of arrogance clad in expensive city-bought finery, surveyed the meager crowd with a smirk that could curdle milk. His wealth was a shadow that choked the valley, his cruelty a legend whispered in hushed, fearful tones. Today, he had orchestrated a spectacle, a masterpiece of malice designed to shatter the spirit of one Caleb Johnson, a struggling rancher whose quiet dignity Thorne found inexplicably offensive. "Gather round, good people, gather round." Thorne's voice, amplified by his self-importance, boomed across the parched earth. "Witness a most charitable act." His eyes, cold as winter stones, fixed on Caleb, who stood apart, his worn clothes a stark contrast to Thorne's opulence, his face a mask of weary resilience. Caleb knew Thorne's charity always came with a venomous sting. The crowd, a mix of Thorne's sniveling sycophants and a few downtrodden townsfolk dragged there by morbid curiosity, shuffled closer. Then, Thorne gestured dramatically towards a covered wagon. Two of his brutish ranch hands pulled back the canvas with a flourish, revealing a woman seated in a simple wooden wheelchair. She was black, her skin the color of rich mahogany, her features fine and proud despite the fear that flickered in her wide, intelligent eyes. A gasp rippled through the onlookers. She was undeniably beautiful, but her stillness was profound, her lower body unnervingly immobile. "Behold," Thorne announced, his voice dripping with mock grandeur. "A bride for our dear Caleb. A gift, shall we say, from my benevolent heart." He paused for effect, letting the cruel implications sink in. "I hear tell Caleb needs a wife, a companion for his lonely nights on that illustrious estate of his." Derisive laughter, led by Thorne's lackeys, echoed. "And so, I present Ebony." "A bit stationary, perhaps," Thorne drawled, gesturing dismissively at her legs, "but she possesses a certain quietude. And for the paltry sum of one broken wagon wheel, the value of which I've already deducted from your outstanding, and frankly, embarrassing debts, Caleb, she is yours." He tossed a chipped wheel hub at Caleb's feet, the metal clanging discordantly in the charged silence. The humiliation was a physical blow, designed to cripple Caleb as surely as the woman in the chair appeared to be. Thorne was not just offering a bride, he was selling a human being, a black woman, paralyzed, as the ultimate insult, a cruel joke to broadcast Caleb's desperation and Thorne's absolute power. Ebony's gaze met Caleb's. In her eyes, he saw not emptiness, but a storm of emotions, fear, shame, but also a flicker of defiance, a spark of an unbroken spirit. Caleb's jaw tightened. The valley folk expected him to erupt in rage, to refuse, to crumble. Thorne leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive brandy and contempt. "What say you, dirt farmer? Will you take this treasure off my hands? Or will you admit, finally, that you are nothing?" The air crackled. Caleb's gaze shifted from Thorne's sneering face to Ebony, truly seeing her, not as a symbol of his humiliation, but as a fellow soul trapped in Thorne's vicious game. He saw the proud set of her shoulders, the intelligence in her eyes that even fear could not extinguish. He saw a human being deserving of dignity, not derision. His voice, when it came, was low, steady, but it cut through Thorne's smug pronouncements like a knife. "She is not a treasure to be bartered, Thorne. She is a woman," he bent and picked up, not the wagon wheel hub, but a single wildflower growing defiantly in the dust nearby. He walked towards Ebony, ignoring Thorne's sputtering disbelief. He offered her the flower. "I am Caleb Johnson," he said softly, his eyes holding hers. "If you are willing, I would be honored to have you as my wife." The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the mockery from the air. Thorne's face contorted, first in shock, then in a dark, gathering fury. This was not the script he had written. He had intended to break Caleb, to see him grovel. Instead, this impoverished rancher, this nobody, was turning his cruel prank on its head, meeting venom with a quiet, unshakable grace. Ebony's fingers, trembling slightly, reached out and accepted the wildflower. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, but it was not a tear of despair. It was something far more complex, something that Thorne, in his arrogant blindness, could never comprehend. The struggle was far from over, the injustice still a raw, gaping wound, but in that moment, a tiny seed of defiance had been sown in the barren soil of Redemption Valley. And Jedediah Thorne, who believed himself the master puppeteer, had just handed his most underestimated victim the very strings that could lead to his undoing. What Caleb did next, marrying her that very day, was not an act of desperation, but the first note in a symphony of reckoning that Thorne was utterly unprepared to hear. The valley watched, holding its breath, sensing that the old, cruel order was on the verge of a seismic shift, though none could yet predict the tremors to come. The initial shockwave of Caleb's acceptance sent ripples of disbelief through Thorne's assembly of mockers. Thorne, accustomed to his word being law and his cruelty being entertainment, found himself momentarily speechless, his jowly face turning a mottled shade of purple. His sycophants, unsure how to react without their master's cue, exchanged uneasy glances. The struggling rancher, the man they all looked down upon, had not only refused to be broken but had somehow seized a sliver of moral high ground. Married? Thorne finally spluttered, his voice a harsh bark. You'll marry her? Today? Are you insane, Johnson? Look at her. She's a broken thing. A burden. This was a jest, you fool, a way to show you your place. Caleb straightened, his gaze unwavering as he faced the larger, wealthier man. I see a woman, Thorne. Not a jest. And my place is beside anyone who is treated with such contempt. The preacher is in town for the circuit. We will be married before sunset. He then turned to Ebony, his voice softening again. Miss Ebony, are you truly willing? This is no life of ease I offer. Her eyes, luminous and deep, held his. She gave a slow, deliberate nod, a gesture of profound trust that struck Caleb to his core. In that silent affirmation, a bond was forged, an alliance against the casual cruelty of their tormentor. Thorne's laughter, when it finally erupted, was harsh and brittle. He's mad. Utterly mad. Marry her then, you sentimental fool. Chain yourself to a millstone. Let the whole valley witness your idiocy. He swept his arm towards his cronies. Let's give the happy couple some privacy to prepare for their glorious union. The sycophant snickered, following Thorne as he stormed towards the saloon, eager to regale anyone who would listen with the tale of Caleb's folly. Only a few of the poorer townsfolk remained, their expressions a mixture of pity and adorning, hesitant respect. An elderly woman, Mrs. Henderson, whose small farm bordered Caleb's, stepped forward, her face etched with a lifetime of her own struggles. Caleb, she said, her voice raspy but kind, you have a good heart. Too good for this valley sometimes. She looked at Ebony with gentle eyes. Welcome, child. It won't be easy, but he's a decent man. Caleb managed a grateful nod. He carefully maneuvered Ebony's wheelchair towards his own worn buckboard wagon. The transfer was awkward, but he was surprisingly gentle, his calloused hands careful not to cause her any pain or indignity. Ebony remained silent, her face unreadable, but her grip on the wildflower was tight. As they made their slow journey towards the dusty street where the preacher kept a small office, the weight of Caleb's decision settled upon him. He had acted on instinct, on a deep-seated revulsion for Thorne's cruelty and a surge of protective empathy for Ebony. He knew nothing about her past, the reasons for her condition. He only knew that no human being deserved to be a pawn in Thorne's twisted games. The marriage ceremony was stark, conducted in the preacher's cramped, dimly lit room, witnessed only by Mrs. Henderson and the preacher's weary wife. The vows exchanged were simple, traditional, yet they resonated with an unspoken gravity. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Caleb felt not a sense of doom, as Thorne had predicted, but a strange, quiet resolve. He had done the right thing, the only thing his conscience would allow. As he wheeled Ebony out into the fading daylight, he knew Thorne and his cronies would be watching, judging, mocking. He didn't care. He had taken a stand. Now, he had to figure out what came next. The journey to his ranch was slow and silent, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the sigh of the evening wind through the sparse prairie grass. He had a wife Thorne had intended as an emblem of his ruin. But Caleb looked at Ebony, at the proud line of her jaw silhouetted against the twilight sky, and a different thought began to form. Perhaps, just perhaps, she was not an emblem of ruin, but the key to a future Thorn could never have imagined. If you're finding yourself moved by Caleb's unexpected courage, and wondering how this improbable union could possibly challenge a tyrant like Thorn, then you'll want to keep watching. Because the quiet dignity of the underestimated often conceals a strength that can topple empires built on arrogance and cruelty. What secrets did Ebony hold? And how would Caleb's simple act of decency ignite a firestorm? Life on Caleb's ranch was a testament to his resilience, a stark contrast to the opulence of Thorn's sprawling estate. The small cabin was weathered but meticulously clean, the fences mended with whatever materials Caleb could find, the few livestock he owned lean but cared for. He made a comfortable space for Ebony near the warmth of the hearth, fashioning a ramp for her wheelchair with surprising ingenuity. In the days that followed their unconventional marriage, a quiet routine settled over them. Caleb rose before dawn, tending to his chores with a grim determination, the added responsibility of caring for Ebony weighing on him, yet also fueling a new sense of purpose. He spoke to her gently, narrating his day, explaining the workings of the ranch, never demanding a response, never treating her as anything less than an equal mind trapped in an uncooperative body. He bathed her with respectful care, cooked simple but nourishing meals, and read to her in the evenings from a worn copy of Shakespeare he'd inherited from his mother, his voice a low rumble in the quiet cabin. Ebony, for her part, was an enigma. Her eyes followed Caleb's every move, watchful, intelligent, but her silence remained profound. The fear he had seen initially had receded, replaced by a deep, assessing thoughtfulness. He noticed small things, the way her fingers would tighten almost imperceptibly on the armrest of her chair when he spoke of Thorn's latest injustice in the valley, the slight upward tilt of her lips when he recounted a humorous encounter with Mrs. Henderson. He began to understand that her stillness was not vacancy, but a fortress. One evening, as a storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil in the valley, Caleb was mending a piece of tack by the fire. He spoke, more to himself than to her, of Thorn's tightening grip on local water rights, threatening the smaller ranches. He thinks he owns the sky, the water, the very air we breathe, Caleb murmured, his frustration palpable. Suddenly, Ebony reached out a hand, her fingers brushing his arm. It was the first voluntary gesture she had made towards him that was not a simple necessity. He looked at her, startled. Her eyes were bright, urgent. Slowly, painstakingly, she lifted her hand and tapped her temple, then pointed towards a small, locked wooden chest Caleb had seen her arrive with, a chest Thorn's men had callously tossed into the wagon. It had remained untouched in a corner. This? Caleb asked, his heart beginning to pound. There's something in this chest you want me to see. She nodded, a clear, definite movement. Her gaze was intense. He retrieved the chest, placing it on her lap. The lock was simple. He found a small tool and managed to pick it. Inside, nestled amongst a few items of clothing, was a thick, leather-bound journal and a packet of official-looking documents, tied with string. Ebony's hand trembled as she pushed the journal towards him. He opened it. The handwriting was elegant, precise. And as he began to read, the truth of Ebony's identity, and the depth of Thorn's villainy, began to unfurl with horrifying clarity. Her name was Ebony Vance, and she was not some nameless, helpless vagrant. She was, or rather had been, an investigative journalist from a prominent East Coast newspaper, sent to Redemption Valley under an assumed, more common name, to uncover rumors of widespread corruption, land fraud, and exploitation spearheaded by none other than Jedediah Thorn. The journal detailed her meticulous investigation, her infiltration of Thorn's outer circle, the evidence she had painstakingly gathered, forged deeds, coerced testimonies, records of intimidation and violence. Then, the entries stopped abruptly. The last one described her growing fear that Thorn was becoming suspicious. The documents were copies of incriminating ledgers, sworn affidavits from terrified locals she had convinced to speak, and even a crudely drawn map showing locations of falsified boundary markers and hidden caches related to Thorn's smuggling operations. Caleb looked up from the journal, his face pale. Thorn, he did this to you, didn't he? Your paralysis, it wasn't an illness. Ebony's eyes filled with tears, but her expression was resolute. She nodded again, Then, with immense effort, she mouthed a single word, her voice a barely audible, raspy whisper, the first sound he had truly heard from her. Ambush. The story pieced itself together with chilling speed. Thorn, realizing who she was and how much she knew, had orchestrated an accidental runaway carriage, a fall from a treacherous cliff. The journal didn't specify, as it ended before that. He had meant to kill her. Her survival, albeit paralyzed and initially unable to speak clearly due to the trauma and perhaps drugs Thorn's quack doctor administered, was an inconvenience. He'd kept her isolated, a prisoner, likely unsure what to do with her, until the cruel idea of the bride for Caleb presented itself, a way to dispose of her, humiliate his enemy, and ensure she was silenced forever, under the watch of a man too poor and powerless to help her. He had underestimated Caleb's compassion. He had underestimated Ebony's will to survive. And he had, most fatally, underestimated the power of the truth she carried. Caleb's hand closed over hers, his grip firm. "He thought he was burying you, Ebony," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He didn't know you were a seed." The hidden power was not just Caleb's integrity, it was Ebony's mind, her courage, and the devastating evidence she had protected through an unimaginable ordeal. The game had changed. It was no longer about mere survival, it was about justice. The storm outside seemed to pause, as if listening. Inside the small cabin, a silent vow was made. Jedediah Thorn's reign of terror was about to face its fiercest challenge. The revelation of Ebony's true identity and the explosive contents of her journal transformed the small, humble cabin into a war room. Caleb, a man accustomed to the straightforward struggles of taming land and livestock, now found himself a key player in a far more dangerous game, one of wits, courage, and high-stakes justice. He spent hours with Ebony, poring over her notes, her clear, analytical mind, though hampered by the difficulty of communication, guiding him through the labyrinth of Thorn's crimes. She would painstakingly point to passages, her eyes flashing with renewed fire, occasionally mouthing words or using gestures to clarify complex points. Her paralysis remained, a cruel testament to Thorn's brutality, but her spirit was visibly reigniting, fueled by Caleb's unwavering belief and support. He learned that her voice had been partially lost due to the trauma and a subsequent illness exacerbated by Thorn's neglect, but with his patient encouragement and the burning need to articulate her evidence, faint rasps were slowly strengthening into whispered syllables. They knew they couldn't simply walk into the sheriff's office. Sheriff Brody was a known Thorn crony, his pockets well lined with Thorn's ill-gotten gains. They needed a plan, a way to present the evidence that was irrefutable and public, leaving Thorn no room to maneuver, no shadows to slip back into. The annual Founders' Day picnic was approaching, the one day Thorn insisted on playing the benevolent patriarch to the entire valley, a grand display of his supposed generosity, which was, in reality, a celebration of his dominance. It was the perfect stage. Caleb began making subtle inquiries, gauging the mood of the valley. He spoke to other struggling ranchers, planting seeds of doubt about Thorn's recent land acquisitions, referencing half-forgotten rumors that Ebony's documents now substantiated. He found fear, yes, but also a simmering resentment, a desperation for change. He also made a perilous nighttime ride to the next county, seeking out a federal marshal he'd heard tell was a man of integrity, immune to Thorn's local influence. He laid out a summarized version of Ebony's findings, careful not to reveal too much too soon, but enough to pique the marshal's interest and secure a promise of discreet observation. The risk was enormous. If Thorn got wind of their plan, their lives wouldn't be worth a plugged nickel. Ebony, meanwhile, worked tirelessly. Caleb rigged up a system where she could point to letters on a board to spell out words more quickly, and she began to reconstruct her investigation, adding details from her memory, her eyes blazing with intellectual ferocity. She insisted on being present at the picnic, not hidden away. She would face Thorn herself. "He must see me," she whispered to Caleb, each word an effort, but laden with determination. Caleb, looking at her frail body but indomitable will, felt a surge of admiration so profound it bordered on reverence. This woman, subjected to unimaginable cruelty, was a warrior. The day of the Founders' Day picnic dawned bright and deceptively cheerful. Thorn, resplendent in a new suit, presided over the affair like a king holding court, his sycophants fawning, the townsfolk offering forced smiles. He made a grandiloquent speech about prosperity and community, conveniently omitting his role in stifling both for his own gain. Then, as he was about to award a farcical prize for the best-kept farm to one of his own foremen, naturally, Caleb's wagon appeared at the edge of the clearing. He was not alone. Ebony sat beside him, dressed in a simple but dignified dark dress Mrs. Henderson had helped her alter. Her hair was neatly plaited, her gaze fixed on Thorn with an unnerving intensity. A hush fell over the crowd. Thorn's smile faltered, replaced by a dark scowl. "Johnson! What is the meaning of this intrusion? And with her again? Have you no shame, parading your folly?" Caleb brought the wagon to a halt directly in front of the makeshift podium. "We are not here for your prizes, Thorn," Caleb's voice rang out, clear and strong, devoid of its usual quietness. "We are here for justice." He helped Ebony from the wagon, carefully settling her into her wheelchair. She held a small, new satchel on her lap, a satchel containing copies of the most damning pieces of evidence. "You remember Miss Vance, don't you, Thorn?" Caleb continued, his eyes like chips of ice. "Or perhaps you knew her by another name when she was investigating your business practices." Thorn's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about, you insolent beggar." Ebony's voice, though still quiet and raspy, carried an undeniable authority in the sudden silence. "You know. Jedediah," she looked directly at him. "You tried to silence me. But truth has a louder voice." From the edges of the crowd, several grim-faced men stepped forward. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, wore the unmistakable badge of a U.S. Marshal. "Jedediah Thorn," Marshal Clayton announced, his voice booming, "I have here a warrant for your arrest, based on substantial evidence of fraud, conspiracy, intimidation, and attempted murder." Chaos erupted. Thorn sputtered, protested, his arrogance cracking to reveal the panicked bully beneath. Ebony, with Caleb's assistance, began to distribute copies of key documents to the stunned onlookers, the forged signatures, the fraudulent land claims, the chilling account of her attempted murder. The faces of Thorn's sycophants turned ashen as they saw the undeniable proof. The unraveling had begun, public, irrefutable, and devastating. Thorn's web of lies, so carefully constructed over years of tyranny, was being torn apart thread by thread, right before the eyes of the very people he had oppressed. His downfall was no longer a distant possibility, it was a rapidly unfolding, public spectacle. Jedediah Thorn's world imploded with the swift, brutal efficiency of a controlled demolition. His blustering denials turned into incoherent ramblings as Marshal Clayton's men, impassive and resolute, closed in. The sycophants, who moments before had been basking in his reflected power, scattered like rats from a flooding cellar, their faces etched with a mixture of terror and dawning self-preservation. Some even began to offer corroborating whispers against their former benefactor, eager to distance themselves from the sinking ship. The irrefutable evidence, distributed by Caleb and validated by Ebony's quiet, steely presence, circulated through the crowd. Murmurs of shock turned into exclamations of outrage as the townsfolk, one by one, recognized names, dates, and locations pertinent to their own exploitation or that of their neighbors. Forged signatures on land deeds that had dispossessed families, coerced water rights agreements that had bankrupted small ranchers, testimonies of brutal intimidation tactics, it was all there, a meticulous catalogue of Thorn's reign of greed. Thorn, his face a mask of apoplectic rage and disbelief, lunged towards Ebony. You lying, crippled." Before he could utter another venomous word, Marshal Clayton had him in ironclad restraints. "You'll have plenty of time to voice your opinions in a federal court, Thorn," the Marshal stated calmly, his voice cutting through the din. The sight of the once mighty Jedediah Thorn, manacled and defeated, his expensive suit now rumpled and stained with dust from his brief struggle, was a vision of karmic retribution so potent it left the valley breathless. His empire, built on fear and deceit, crumbled like a sandcastle against an incoming tide. Legal proceedings followed swiftly. The evidence Ebony had so courageously preserved, supplemented by Caleb's determined efforts and the testimony of newly emboldened locals, was overwhelming. Thorn's lawyers, high-priced and initially confident, found themselves facing an avalanche they could not stop. His assets were frozen, his vast landholdings placed under federal scrutiny. The crony sheriff was implicated and swiftly removed from office, his badge stripped in disgrace. The downfall was spectacular, public, and a direct consequence of Thorne's own hubris. He had underestimated Caleb's integrity, viewing him as insignificant. He had underestimated Ebony's resilience, seeing her only as a broken object for his cruel amusement. He had believed himself untouchable, and in that belief, he had sown the seeds of his own destruction. The trial was a sensation, drawing attention far beyond Redemption Valley. Ebony, though still reliant on her wheelchair and her voice still bearing the raspy traces of her trauma, delivered her testimony with unwavering clarity and dignity. She recounted her investigation, the threats, the ambush, and Thorne's cruel machinations, her quiet words painting a damning portrait of a ruthless tyrant. Caleb stood by her side throughout, a pillar of quiet strength and support. The verdict was inevitable, guilty on multiple counts. Jedediah Thorne was sentenced to a long term in federal prison, stripped of his wealth, his name forever synonymous with corruption and cruelty. Redemption Valley, for so long suffocated by his shadow, could finally breathe. In the aftermath, a new dawn broke over the valley. The land Thorne had stolen was, where possible, returned to its rightful owners or placed into a trust for community development. Caleb and Ebony, bound by their shared ordeal and their triumph over injustice, found their partnership deepening into a profound and abiding love. They didn't seek riches or power, but the valley, recognizing their courage and integrity, looked to them for leadership. Ebony, her sharp intellect now free to flourish, became a vital voice in rebuilding the community, advocating for fairness and transparency. Caleb, his quiet strength now widely respected, worked to heal the divisions Thorne had sown. They transformed Caleb's once struggling ranch, not into an empire like Thorne's, but into a model of sustainable and ethical farming, a place of welcome and opportunity. They established the Ebony Vance Foundation for Truth and Justice, dedicated to helping those silenced by oppression and supporting investigative journalism that held power accountable. It was a testament to their belief that one voice, one act of courage, could indeed change the world. Their home, once a symbol of Caleb's hardship, became a beacon of hope, its doors open, its hearth warm, a symbol that even in the dust of despair, resilience and love could blossom into something truly beautiful and enduring. The triumphant resolution was not just Thorne's fall, but the rise of a new ethos in Redemption Valley, one built on the foundations of courage, compassion, and the unshakable power of truth. The story of Caleb Johnson and Ebony Vance became a legend in Redemption Valley, whispered around campfires and shared in town gatherings, a living testament to the indomitable power of the human spirit. It was a tale that began with an act of unimaginable cruelty, a powerful man's attempt to crush the vulnerable, but it transformed into an epic of courage, resilience, and ultimate, resounding justice. Jedediah Thorne, once the valley's overlord, languished in a distant prison cell, his name a curse, his memory a warning. His downfall served as a stark reminder that arrogance is a blindfold, and contempt for others is a poison that inevitably consumes the one who wields it. He had sought to make Caleb an object of ridicule and Ebony a symbol of brokenness, but in his venomous pride, he had only succeeded in forging an unbreakable alliance and igniting a fire of righteous retribution that consumed his entire corrupt empire. Caleb and Ebony, their lives forever intertwined by the crucible of their shared experience, never sought glory. Yet, glory found them in the respect and love of their community. Ebony's physical healing was slow and partial, she remained reliant on her wheelchair for mobility, but her spirit soared, her voice, though never fully recovering its former timbre, became one of the most influential in the valley. She proved, daily, that strength was not solely of the body, but of the mind, the heart, and the unwavering conviction in one's principles. Her intellect, once a hidden weapon against Thorne, now became a guiding light for progress, helping to establish fair trade practices, educational programs, and support systems for the marginalized. Caleb's ranch thrived, not through exploitation, but through hard work, innovation, and a deep respect for the land and its people. It became a place where those who had been underestimated, like he once was, found opportunity and dignity. The Ebony Vance Foundation for Truth and Justice flourished, its reach extending beyond Redemption Valley, a beacon for those fighting their own battles against oppression. It funded journalists who dared to speak truth to power, provided legal aid to the unjustly accused, and supported communities struggling to break free from the shackles of corruption. Their love story, born amid such cruelty and turmoil, was a quiet, powerful thing, a testament to mutual respect, shared purpose, and the healing power of unwavering devotion. They had faced the darkest aspects of human nature and had not only survived but had emerged stronger, their lives a testament to the transformative power of compassion. And so, the scales of justice, so grievously tipped by Thorne's malice, were not merely rebalanced, they were recalibrated to a higher moral standard. The echoes of Thorne's cruel laughter had long faded, replaced by the sounds of a community rebuilding, of hope rekindled, of dignity restored. Let this story serve as an enduring reminder: never underestimate the quiet ones, for their dignity is their armor, their integrity their sword. Prejudice is the refuge of the ignorant, and arrogance the downfall of tyrants. True power is not found in wealth hoarded or control exerted through fear, but in the courage to stand for what is right, the compassion to lift others, and the unwavering belief that even the smallest spark of decency can illuminate the darkest night, guiding the way to a just and triumphant dawn. If this story of courage and resilience has touched your heart, share it, so that others too may find inspiration in the enduring strength of the human spirit. And reflect, perhaps in the comments below, on a time when you witnessed the underestimated rise, or when an act of simple kindness made a profound difference. For in these shared stories, we reinforce the timeless truth that good will, ultimately, prevail.